Mr. Inslee, and then we'll go. Mr. Inslee, are you ready?
I am, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment to offer.
Gentleman has an amendment at the desk. Do you wish to offer it as an amendment?
I do. I will be offering him en bloc. It's Inslee unnumbered and Inslee 49. I'd wish to offer him en bloc. I'll be then separating the question and withdrawing one of them.
Without objection, the
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
gentleman state his point of order.
Aren't we rotating, and like you folks just had one, wouldn't we come to this side first before you go to your side again, just at normal, regular order?
The gentleman shouldn't be concerned about it.
Oh, I'm not.
You have one amendment left on your side. We have a couple on our side.
I'm not real concerned.
Don't worry about it.
That means we should get an amendment actually passed if we, you know, it's one thing to offer, Mr. Chairman, it's another thing to have them accept.
Would the chairman yield?
Who's asking me to yield to whom?
Boyer? If we're going
Mr. Boyer, you're going to be offering the next amendment.
we are. We're going to do ours en bloc. So why don't you take your remaining amendments, do them en bloc, and maybe we can finish up the bill. Just a suggestion.
Thanks for the suggestion. So it's one we ought to. No, it's a helpful one. But we have different members on different issues, and
I know. I just.
They have different deals made.
They have rights. People have rights as individual members, and some are willing to put them together, and some not. And in this case, for example, by unanimous consent, I'd like to ask that Mr. Inslee be able to offer his two amendments in block, one of which he's going to withdraw, as I understand it, but he hasn't asked to withdraw it yet. So I'd like to recognize him, but let's be sure we have unanimous consent that the two amendments be considered as read. And Mr. Inslee, you have two amendments, but you only get 1 5-minute period of time, and you're now recognized for that.
Thank you. I will be as brief as duty permits. The first amendment, the one we hope to pass, and we may or may not have a vote on, but we will pass, is Inslee 49. Basically, this amendment will create a loan guarantee program for the adoption and perfection of high-capacity transmission technologies. We know that we have to substantially increase the capacity of our transmission system to deal both with increasing demands and the fact that renewable energy now requires a whole new dynamic of our transmission system. We know that whereas we used to be able to bring coal to the generating plant, we can't bring wind to the generating plant, or solar cell, we can't ship photons or wind to a central generating plant. We have to generate the electricity where they are located and then transmit them to the site where we need the electricity. So we know we need substantial changes in our transmission system. This is a proposal that Mr. Hoyer originally proposed in legislation that would essentially make high-capacity transmission technologies eligible for stimulus funding and create a loan guarantee a program to help their adoption. We haven't had enough props in our hearing, so I can hold one up. This is a wire by American Semiconductor, and they have a system where by using super-cooled metals, they can create the same capacity at like 150th the amount of volume of metal and less than 1/5 of the width of a corridor. And we now have at least 3 places in the United States lines that are actually, number one, underground, don't have visual problems that bother our constituents, have a 50-foot corridor rather than a 300-foot corridor, and have efficiencies in the area of 20 to 30% more efficient. So we want to move these technologies forward. We need to, the amendment simply would make this eligible for stimulus funding and create a small $100 million grant program for the perfection of these technologies. It's one of the things we have to do. I'll be offering that amendment. The second amendment I will be withdrawing attempts to find a solution to our siting challenges we have with our transmission system. We know how difficult it is to site transmission lines. All of us who are in public life understand that our constituents, Republicans and Democrats, share all two traits. We all want unlimited electricity, and we want zero electric lines anywhere in our states and country. Reconciling those two things is difficult. The amendment I will offer and withdraw would propose a way to solve that problem or move forward by creating backstop siting authority for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It would suggest that if a state is unsuccessful in siting a line after 3 years, that the FERC would have jurisdiction then and only then to site the line. The proposal we would make would suggest that that should be for lines that help fulfill utilities' obligation to provide renewable energy. It would also give great deference to states by requiring the recommendations of states to be followed as to siting even after the 3-year period, unless the FERC could find a reason that would make that a non-viable proposal. It would not expand the eminent domain authority, but would be essentially the same as if states provided the siting of these lines. Now, the reason I have proposed this is it's just very clear that we have some responsibility that requires some heavy lifting. And that heavy lifting is to find a way to respond to the national challenge for a national grid. When we built our grid, it responded to local challenges and local generation capability. We now need a national system that will respond to the national challenge of dealing with global warming and really using the renewable energy sources that we have. So there may be many proposals to accomplish that. This is one. We have not been able to find consensus as of this moment on this subject, but I look forward to working with Mr. Markey, Mr. Waxman, to hopefully find a solution by the time we go to the floor. I want to thank Mr. Markey particularly
Before you thank
for
Mr.
his
Markey,
efforts.
would you yield to me?
And I will yield to Mr. Waxman.
Let me express my strong feeling of that we must have a transmission provision in this legislation, especially for the West. And the West needs the interconnect and the ability to develop that transmission. So Mr. Markey, as chairman of the subcommittee, is going to hold hearings on it. And by the time we get to the House floor, I expect we're going to develop an amendment that we will put into the legislation. We can't ignore the needs for the western part of this country, while at the same time, of course, we need to understand the concerns of the people on the East Coast. But many of us live on the West Coast, and we want this transmission issue resolved. You might want to yield to Mr. Markey. The gentleman, without objection, gentleman is given an additional minute.
Yield,
No
Mr. Markey.
objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank the gentleman very much for all of his work on this legislation. There are many different stakeholders involved in this issue. And as the chairman said, we think it's advisable for us to have a full-blown hearing on this issue with all of the stakeholders in the country who are able to participate. But as the chairman said, towards the goal of developing a transmission piece for this legislation. And without question, the gentleman from Washington State has been the driving force on this issue. And we intend to work with him as the leader towards developing that final product that we can use in the legislation. And I thank the gentleman for all of his work.
I appreciate that. I look forward to working with you. Just one final comment. This bill is going to require, in this challenge, some really heavy lifting by all of us, whether you're from a coal-fired state or a steel state or a hydro state. All of us are going to have heavy lifting here. That's certainly true on transmission, and I hope we can find a solution so we all share in that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman from Washington has withdrawn one of his amendments dealing with the transmission interconnect, and his other amendment is still pending. Mr. Barton?
Seek recognition to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman's recognized.
First of all, I want to say that the amendment that he's not withdrawn, the minority is prepared to accept. On the amendment that he did withdraw, I would like to point out that the Republican alternative had a transmission siting component to it. There were some differences. The gentleman's amendment that he's withdrawing is good as far as it goes, but in the eastern interconnection, it only applies to states that are in that eastern interconnection, and the amendment that I saw earlier was for underground corridors, but this one apparently is above ground also, but it only applies to projects that are for the renewable energy component. We're going to need transmission siting for all types of transmission, not just for renewable energy projects. So we stand prepared. Mr. Terry has worked on this amendment. We had something similar to this in the Energy Policy Act of 2005 for what we called high-intensity corridors between the states that there was, I believe, a court challenge to. So the gentleman from Washington and gentleman from Nebraska have certainly identified an area that regardless of what happens to this particular bill, they have identified a problem that we need to address because our transmission grid is out of date. It is subject to blackouts. It is also subject to potential terrorist attacks. It was designed for a regulated market, which more and more we're beginning to have a deregulated power market at the wholesale level. So we stand prepared to work with Mr. Inslee, Mr. Waxman, Mr. Markey, and others to try to solve this problem.
Gentleman yield to me.
Be happy to use.
I thank you very much for those words, and that to me is very encouraging. We need to work together on these issues. This is an important issue on transmission, and as Mr. Inslee said, it may be heavy lifting. This whole bill is heavy lifting. The whole problems of energy and the demand for jobs and independence and economic growth is hard to do.
It's his time.
We need to do it together. We may not be together today on the legislation that is going to pass out of committee, but let me extend an invitation to all the members, Democrat and Republican. Let's sit down and work together as we go forward, because we, I think, should try to reach a point where we can support something on a bipartisan basis that the committee will put forward on the House floor. So I thank you for your comments.
Mr. Barton, would you yield just for a moment, Mr. Barton?
Happy to yield.
I want to thank you also for not correcting me when I referred to these as semiconductors. They are superconducting lines, and I want to appreciate you not humiliating me in the eyes of the United States of America. I take care of that myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It would be impossible for me to humiliate you. But seriously, you have done an excellent job on this bill, and you're to be commended, not just on this section, but on all the sections. You have been an indefatigable proponent of this, and you should have a tremendous celebration this evening for the efforts you've made on behalf of this bill.
The vote now comes after, well, would you yield to Ms. Eshoo?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you to the ranking member for yielding his time. Even though this discussion comes very late in our markup, it is nonetheless, as has been noted by the speakers so far, how important it is. I'm very pleased to co-sponsor this effort at the committee. I mean, current transmission lines are copper. Advanced composite is 30% more efficient. Superconducting is 60% more efficient. And members should recall with some pleasure those that voted for the ARPA funds that there are going to be monies available for this. And so from those that are going to apply, the facilities and utilities, we're going to win in terms of having a much better grid in the country. So this is really important. It bumps up the effort to a whole new level for our country. And so I'm pleased to be part of the effort and glad that the ranking member supports it. I think it'll be good news for the country, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. The vote, the vote now comes on the Inslee amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment's agreed to. The